This afternoon, we can continue to have a sermon to study the words of God.
感谢赞美主，在安息日的下午，我们可以继续在这边查考圣经。
This afternoon, I'd like to share with everyone the topic, Who am I? Who are you?
今天我要跟大家分享的题目是：我是谁？你是谁？
We know that from the Bible, Moses is a very important character.
在圣经里面，摩西是一个很重要的角色。
And we can see that there are a lot of chapters, a lot of content that talk about Moses' life.
圣经里面很多章节、很多内容都是在讲摩西的一生。
And when we look at his life, we can see that it was very remarkable, and God chose him to be his worker.
那我们可以看到，在摩西的一生中是很特别的，神选召他来做他的工人。
And you can also see that through this large expanse of time that he went through a transformation.
也可以看到，在他的一生这么长的时间中，他的改变。
Right. And so this afternoon, I would like to explore this transformation together,
所以今天下午我们要一起来学习他的生命中的转变，
especially through a series of questions he asked in his life.
然后我们接着他在他一生中问的一些问题来学习。
Right. In particular, who am I? Who are you? Right.
尤其是他问我是谁，你是谁？
Right. And so in doing so, hopefully we can gain some understanding in what is humility.
所以从中间我们希望可以学习到什么是谦卑，
And also we can gain some insight in how to serve the Lord better.
然后我们也可以来学习怎么样能够更好的来服侍神。
So let's look at the first time that Moses asked the question, Who am I?
所以我们来看摩西第一次问我是谁。
Let's turn to Exodus chapter 3.
我们来看出埃及记的第3章。
Exodus chapter 3,
出埃及记第3章
verse 11.
11节。
Exodus chapter 3, verse 11.
出埃及记3章11节。
But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?
摩西对神说：“我是什么人，竟能去见法老，将以色列人从埃及领出来呢？”
This is the first time Moses asked this question, Who am I?
这是摩西第一次问：“我是什么人
Right? And actually there's a lot of different ways you can ask this type of question.
有很多方法来问这个问题。
There's a different tone of voice or different meaning when you express this question.
当你讲这个问题的时候，可以有不同的声量、不同的意义。
Right? Over here, when Moses asked this question for the first time, actually he's speaking out of self-pity.
当他第一次问这个问题的时候，他是觉得自己很可怜。
Right? Yeah, it seems like it's humility here, but actually it's out of self-pity.
他可能看起来像谦卑，可是他可能是比较自怜
And
的。
hopefully this will become a little bit more clear as we talk about this.
希望这个等一下我们会讲得更详细一点。
Right? So how did Moses get this way? How come he looked at himself so lowly?
为什么他对自己把自己看得这么低呢？低卑微呢？
We know that this was when Moses was 80 years old.
这个时候摩西已经80岁了，
When he was age 40, he was living in Egypt.
在40岁的时候，他住在埃及。
And actually he was basically a prince he was a prince
他是埃
in
及
the royal
的
palace.
的王子，住在王宫里面，
Right? And he received a lot of education, had much wealth and many opportunities.
还有很多的机会，受很好的教育。
But eventually he began to have this type of self-identity to want to save his own people, the Hebrews.
可是他后来开始自己有自觉，想要救跟他同样的希伯来
So
人，
he was willing to reject all these luxuries in the palace to save his people.
所以他愿意放弃皇宫里面的一切荣华富贵来救他的百姓，
Because the Pharaoh was mistreating his people.
因为法老王对待他的百姓很不公平，
So he started to take things into his own hands
所以他就用自己的能力来做。
and even wound up killing an Egyptian.
他甚至杀了一个埃及人，
Right? And then the next day, his own people rejected him from being their leader. Yeah.
可是隔天他自己的百姓居然不认这个摩西，然后放弃这个摩西，
So by that time, he basically was a fugitive.
所以这时候他只成了一个逃犯，
And he had to escape Egypt because he had killed somebody.
因为他杀了人，所以他必须要逃离埃及，
And so he went from Egypt into the wilderness, to the wilderness of Midian.
所以他从埃及到了米甸的旷野。
And maybe originally this was just supposed to be a temporary escape.
那原本可能只是短暂的逃离，
But eventually it became something pretty much permanent.
可是后来他就长期的在那边停留下来。
Moses was there eventually for 40 more years.
摩西又在那边住了40年。
When he was there, he eventually married.
到他在那边也结了婚，
But this type of marriage actually wasn't typical.
可是他这个婚姻是很不平常的。
Right? Usually, when you're a man, you take someone to be married to you, right?
那一般来说，一个男人会找一个女人来结婚，
But his type of marriage was like he was married into another person's family,
可是他却是好像嫁进去人家的家里一
right?
样。
We can look at Exodus chapter 4, right?
我们来看出埃及记的第4章，
Right? Exodus chapter 4, verse 18.
第4章的18节，
Exodus chapter 4, verse 18.
出埃及记4章18节。
It says, So Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, Please let me go and return to my brethren who are in Egypt, and to see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, Go in peace. Here we can see that Moses even had to ask his father-in-law for permission to go.
我们这边看到摩西甚至要求请问他的这个岳父才
So
能
you
够
can
离
see
开
that，the family dynamic was not very typical.
所以他们这个家庭的状况是不太一样的。
Usually, the husband, the man, doesn't have to ask his father-in-law for permission to do things
一
like
般
this.
来说，这个男人不需要问他的岳父来得到允许。
And even more clearer, if we jump to verse 24,
如果你继续看24节，
Exodus chapter 4, verse 24,
4章24节
it，says, And it came to pass on the way at the encampment that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Here, God wanted to kill Moses when he was about to go to Egypt.
在这里，摩西要到埃及的路上，神想要杀他。
And what was the reason why God wanted to kill him?
为什么神要杀他呢？
It turns out that Moses never had his children circumcised,
因为摩西的小孩从来没受过割礼。
right? Sorry, God wanted to kill Moses' firstborn. I'm sorry, right?
摩西这个神想要杀摩西的长子，
Yeah, because they were never circumcised.
因为他们从来没有受过
Yes,
割
this
礼，
is also another clue about his irregular family dynamic.
所以我们也可以在他这边看到他的家庭的状况不太一
Right?
般。
Because usually, in this case here, the grandchildren seem to belong to the wife's side of the family and
Yeah.
not to Moses himself. Right?
因为他的小孩好像是属于他的太太那边，不属于摩西。
And that he didn't even have the authority to circumcise his own children.
他甚至没有权利来让他小孩受割礼。
So anyhow, we can see that when Moses was in the wilderness, he got married, but things started to become very plain and ordinary, and he was in a very servile position.
所以当摩西在这旷野居住了40年，他的生活是很平凡无淡的，而且他也没有什么权利，
And he basically just served as a shepherd for his father-in-law.
他只是在他岳父家的一个牧羊人。
And a shepherds in the culture that he grew up in Egypt, actually was a culture that was very looked down upon.
那在埃及这个地方，牧羊人的职位是别人看不起的。
Right, so from all these indicators, we can see that when Moses escaped into the wilderness, he basically almost had given up on his ambitions, on his life.
所以我们看到，当摩西到这旷野里面，他好像就放弃他生活中的一些志向。
This, of course, was all according to God's plan.
当然，这也是神的旨意。
Right, God allowed him to be raised among royalty, but then God also brought him low to have to struggle and live among shepherd people. Right?
神让他在荣耀的皇宫里面长大，神也让他成为一个很卑贱的人，在牧羊。
And so when God called Moses, he was in a very pitiful state. Yeah.
所以当神呼召摩西的时候，他那时候情况很卑微。
Right? And so when God calls him and says, "Come now," right, in chapter 3, verse 10, it says, "Come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, and you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt."
所以当神呼召他说：“你去帮我把以色列人从埃及带出来。”
Moses asked, "Well, who am I?" I don't. He doesn't see himself as a person of any value at all.
摩西说：“我是谁呢？”他觉得自己一点价值都没有。
Right. And again, this is out of self-pity, not out of humility.
这其实不是谦卑，而是卑微自己。
What's the difference between self-pity and humility?
那这个谦卑跟这个自己觉得很卑贱是有什么不同呢？
Actually, self-pity, when you look at it, is actually a type of pride.
其实这个自己觉得卑贱也是骄傲的一种。
Right? Because even though it doesn't seem like it, and on the surface, you're putting yourself down and lower.
虽然表面上你好像把自己放得很低，
But at the heart of it, the focus is still on ourselves.
可是其实上你还是注重你自己。
Right? And therefore, there's that element of pride there. We just focus on our own mentality, our own thought, our own view of ourselves. Okay?
所以这中间还是有骄傲，因为你完全只是注意自己在想什么。
And he did not realize that it was the Lord God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who is now calling him to be his servant.
他并没有察觉到说这是亚伯拉罕、以撒、雅各的神来呼召他。
Right? And so Moses just continued to focus on himself. All the while, God kept trying to encourage him and give him confidence.
可是摩西这时候只想到他自己，但是神还是一直在鼓励他。
Right? We can read verse 12.
我们来看12节。
So God said, "I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." Right here, we can see God's encouragement that Moses, I'm going to be with you all the time.
我们这边看到神是怎么样鼓励他，说我会随时与你同在。
I'm even prophesying a sign that's going to happen. You will eventually come back with my people to this mountain, and they will worship me.
神甚至预言说，以后你会将百姓从埃及领出来，一起在山上侍奉。
But Moses just kept on asking questions. He had so much self-doubt, so much self-pity.
可是摩西就是一直问问题，他一直觉得自己很自卑，
We
很
can
不可
jump
能。
to chapter 4, verse 1.
我们看第4章的第1节，
Exodus chapter 4, verse 1.
出埃及记4章1节。
Then Moses answered and said, "But suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose that they say the Lord has not appeared to you." Right? So here Moses is asking, despite this wonderful sight of a burning bush, despite all these assurances God has given to him, he still is so doubtful of himself. Right?
所以虽然摩西听到神跟他讲话，看到这个会着火的荆棘，但是他还是没有信心。
And maybe this is related to what happened 40 years ago.
这可能是跟40年前发生的事情有
Right?
关。
Maybe that incident where his people rejected him was something very traumatic in his heart.
也许是40年前他的百姓排斥他，让他心里受了重伤
And。so that type of trauma still dwelt on his mind, and he was focusing on that pain, on that hurt, on how no one really would accept him. He has no value. Right?
所以他可能还是觉得自己心里很受伤，然后不敢去做这个事。
Right? But God was showing patience to him.
但是神对他很有耐心，
Eventually, he also tried to allow Moses to see wonderful signs to show that God will be with him.
神甚至给他显了神迹，让他知道神与他同在。
Right? God said, "What is that in your hand?"
神说：“你手里是什么
And Moses said, "It is a rod."
摩西说：“是个杖。
And then God told him to cast it on the ground. It became a snake.
神就说：“丢在地下，就变成条蛇。
Right? This is a very incredible sign right before his eyes.
这是在他眼前显出了大神迹。
Right? And then also, another sign was to put his hand into his bosom.
然后另外一个神迹就是把手放在怀
And
里，
then when he took it out, it became leprous and white as snow.
当他拿出来的时候，就长了大麻风，像雪一样白。
And then when he put it back, it was restored nearly instantly.
然后再放回怀里，又变成像原本一样。
Right? So this is another sign right before his eyes to God showing patience to him, trying to let him know, I'm going to be with you. I'm very powerful. Don't worry about this. Right?
这个神在他面前显出了第二个神迹，让他知道神与他同在，神是有能力的。
But then, despite these signs, Moses continued to focus on himself, on his apparent weaknesses.
当然，过了这些神迹之后，摩西还是一直想到他自己的软弱。
If we jump to chapter 4, verse 10,
我们来看第4章第10节，
right? It says, Then Moses said to the Lord, Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Right? So Moses now, despite the things that he's seen, he's focusing, trying to find some excuse now, right?
所以虽然他看了这些神迹，可是他还是想找理由。
And just focusing on the weaknesses that he has.
他一直在想他自己的一些缺陷。
I have no eloquence. I am slow of tongue.
我是拙口笨舌的人。
Right. And even in verse 13, he's even hinting to try to pass off this responsibility to somebody else.
然后在13节那边，他还想要把这个责任交给别
Right?
人。
It says, Oh Lord, oh my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send.
他说：“神啊，你愿意打发谁就打发谁去吧。”
Right? So I hope that it's more clear that actually Moses was not speaking out of humility here. Yeah.
所以我们可以看得出来，他这不是真正的谦卑，
Actually, this is just a self-pity.
他是自己可怜自己。
And of course, there are many circumstances that brought him to that very low state.
那当然是有很多的原因造成他今天的样子。
But if we are called by God to do something and we just focus on ourselves in a self-pitiful way, actually God will eventually get angry at us.
所以如果说神有一个责任交给我们做，可是我们只是自己可怜自己，最后神可能会发怒。
You can see verse 14.
我们来看14节，
It says, So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses.
所以神就向摩西发怒了，
God was not angry with this type of response.
所以神不喜悦这样子的回答
He。had shown himself so clearly through so many signs, so many assurances, and yet Moses still could not get out of his shell, get out of himself.
神已经给他这么多的保证，这么多的神迹，可是摩西还是在他自己的壳里面。
And then God eventually just relented and said, Okay, I will send your brother Aaron also with you.
所以最后神就说：“我会派你的哥哥亚伦跟你一起。
Right? So this is the first way that Moses was asking this question, Who am I? ”
这是摩西第一次用这样的方式来
It
问。
wasn't humility, it was really out of low self-worth, a low view of himself, self-pity.
不是谦卑，而是自己可怜自
Let's
己。
turn to Romans chapter 12.
我们来看罗马书12章，
Romans chapter 12.
罗马书的12章，
Romans chapter 12, verse 3.
罗马书12章第3节，
Romans chapter 12, verse 3.
罗马书12章第3节。
For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. Here, Paul is telling us to not think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think.
所以保罗这边教导我们说，我们个人不要把自己看得
We
过
may
大。
read this verse and think, wait, what does this have to do with self-pity?
我们可能会读这个经节，想说这跟自己可怜自己有什么
But
关系
again,
呢
like I mentioned before, it's actually self-pity is masquerading as pride.
像我之前讲的一样，这个自己可怜自己中间也是包含了一个骄傲的
We're
程度。
thinking of ourselves too highly than we ought to think.
我们把自己想得过高大了，
Not in the very obvious arrogant way, but in a different way.
并不是骄傲的那种方式来表现出来，而是另外一
It's
种，
still in a very self-centered way.
还是很以自己为中心的样
Right?
子。
We are thinking too highly of ourselves when we allow all of our weaknesses and circumstances to dictate our emotional state.
我们自己把自己想得过高了，我们用自己的情绪来决定一些情况，
And especially in the presence of God.
尤其是在神的面前。
Right? So this is also a different way to look at this verse.
所以这是另外一个解释的方法。
Right? And also, we clearly can see that from Moses. Right?
我们也可以清楚的从摩西的身上看到。
Yeah. So how can we escape from a self-defeating, self-pity type of cycle?
那我们要怎么样离开这个自己可怜自己的一个情
Actually,
况
it
呢？
also goes back to another question Moses asked.
我们要回去看摩西问的另外一个问题
Let's。now go back to Exodus chapter 3.
我们回去看出埃及记的第3章，
Exodus chapter 3.
出埃及记第3章，
Let's now read verse 13.
13节，
Exodus chapter 3, verse 13.
出埃及记3章13节。
Then Moses said to God, Indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? Oh, please read.
所以，摩西对神说：“我到以色列那里，对他们说：你们祖宗的神打发我到你们这里来。他们若问我说他叫什么名字，我要对他们说什么呢？”
Yeah, this is right at the beginning when God was calling Moses to his work.
所以这是刚开始神呼召摩西来做工的时候。
Right? And Moses was asking, when people ask me, what is his name? Who is this God? What should I say to them?
所以摩西就问说：当人家问我说这个神叫什么名字的时候，我要对他们说什么呢？
And in other words, it's basically asking God, who are you?
也好像就是对神问说你是谁？
Right? Put in other words, it's basically asking God, who are you? Who do you say you are? Yeah.
他只是对神说你是谁？你到底是谁？
And so God answered Moses and declared a very famous description.
所以神就回答摩西。
It said, verse 14, and God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you should say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you.
所以神对摩西说：“我是自有永有的。”你要对以色列人说：“那自有永有的打发我到你这里来。”
Actually, in order to escape from self-defeat, self-pity, we must focus on this question.
所以要离开这个自我可怜的状况，我们要来回答这个问题。
Onto God himself, who he is.
我们要来看神到底是谁。
Continue to ask God, who are you?
我们要不断的问神：“你是谁
And God will slowly reveal himself to you. ？”
所以神会慢慢的把自己显现给你
Right?
看。
Here, God revealed to Moses one of his eternal attributes.
所以这里神显给摩西看他一个永生的一个特质，
Which is that he is self-existing. He is an eternal being,
他是一个自有就拥有的。
right? That with God, God is, he is eternal present,
它是永远存在的，
right? Yeah. And that this is the one who has called Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is the one also now who is going to call you to bring his people out of Egypt.
这是呼召亚伯拉罕、以撒、雅各，也是要呼召摩西带领百姓出埃及的神。
So as we focus more on God, then we can start to escape all those negative thoughts we may have about ourselves.
所以，当我们如果说把这个重点放在神身上，我们就可以慢慢脱离我们自己一些
And
观
this
念
is。a process. This will not change overnight,
当然，这不是一夜之间就可以改变的。
right? Because we can see later on Moses continues to have instances where he has self-doubt.
因为我们看到之后，摩西还是有很多时候，他是有疑问的。
Right? We can turn to Exodus chapter 5.
我们来看出埃及记的第5章，
Exodus chapter 5,
出埃及记第5章
verse 22.
22节，
Exodus chapter 5, verse 22.
出埃及记5章22节
It。says, So Moses returned to the Lord and said, Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Why is it you have sent me? This is what Moses asked God after his first encounter with Pharaoh.
所以当摩西第一次碰到法老以后，他就问了这些问题。
Right? And you can see that the first time he asked the Pharaoh to let the people go, of course, Pharaoh said no.
所以我们知道，他第一次问法老让百姓离开，当然法老是不肯的。
But Moses, at the first sign of defeat, of failure, he basically wants to run away.
所以当他发生了这个失败的状况，他其实就是想要逃走。
Not only did the Pharaoh say no, but the Pharaoh even put even more burdens onto the people.
所以法老不但不让百姓走，而且让更加的苦待这些百姓。
Before, straw would be provided for them to make bricks. Now, the people had to go and collect the straw on top of their duty to make bricks.
所以原本百姓需要去拿草做砖，是他们会准备好。现在百姓要自己去找草来做砖。
Right, and of course, this makes the situation even worse because the people now probably dislike Moses even more.
所以这个情况就更糟了，百姓也可能怨恨摩西。
So Moses, in this situation, very naturally, goes back to what he knows best. That, of course, I don't know anything. Who am I? I don't know what I'm doing here.
所以在这个情况发生之后，摩西回到神面前，就好像一副自己不知道该做什么的样子。
Why did you send me? I don't belong here. I know I'm not going to be successful.
为什么你要呼召我呢？我知道我不会成功的。
Ever since that I went to go speak to the Pharaoh, has been nothing but evil that has been given to this people.
当我跟法老提出这个要求之后，只有更苦的事情发生在百姓身上。
Neither has the people been delivered at all. Right?
百姓也没有得到拯救。
This self-doubt continues. Let's jump to chapter 6.
我们再来看第6章
Verse 12.
12节。
Exodus chapter 6, verse 12.
第6章12节。
Right? Because this is after God tries to reassure Moses.
所以神再一次的鼓励摩西。
Right? And then in verse 12, it says, Moses spoke before the Lord, saying, The children of Israel have not heeded me. How then shall Pharaoh heed me? For I am of uncircumcised lips.
所以摩西说：“以色列人都不听我的话，法老怎么肯听我这拙口笨舌的人呢？”
Right? So these are all understandable because Moses was dealing with negative outcomes.
所以我们知道摩西这边有很多负面的情况。
Right? The natural thing to do is to just focus on our low self-worth.
所以人在这个时候只会注意到自己的多不值得。
In verse 30 is also the same thing.
第30节也是一样。
Right? But Moses said before the Lord, Behold, I am of uncircumcised lips. How shall Pharaoh heed me?
还有说我是拙口笨舌的人，法老怎么听我呢？
Right? He's saying that basically he has no persuasive skills when he speaks.
他觉得他没有办法去影响法老。
Right? But eventually, as Moses continued to serve God,
可是摩西在继续服侍神的中间，
the answer to that second question started to become answered, especially right before his eyes.
他在问的这个第二问题，慢慢的在他眼前就得到了答案。
God, who are you? God eventually revealed himself very plainly. Right?
神啊，你到底是谁？神就慢慢的显现给他看。
Right? Through the 10 plagues, through those wonderful, or not wonderful, but those miraculous signs that God used to punish the Egyptians, Moses could see that, wow, God is a very awesome and fearsome God.
在借着这个十灾中间的一些神迹，他看到神的作为。
Right? And eventually we can see that basically what the Lord said he would do, the Lord would do.
他就看到说，神所说的就必实现。
Right? And basically also God was working through Moses.
然后神是借着摩西来做
God
工。
would tell Moses, do this, and then Moses would do that.
神说摩西做这事，摩西就做这
And
事。
then through his service to God, Moses could start to see that, wow, I now know more and more about who God is.
就是他对神的服侍，他可以说我知道神越来越多。
And eventually, that's how he was able to escape from self-pity in order to reach a true state of humility.
所以他就可以慢慢离开这自我可怜的状态，去进入一个真正谦卑的。
Let's turn to Exodus chapter 16 now.
我们现在来看出埃及记的16章。
This is after God allowed the people to escape Egypt already, right?
这个时候百姓已经逃离埃及了，
And they were in the wilderness,
他们在旷野中
and the
间，
people began to complain about the lack of food.
然后百姓就在抱怨说没有食物可以吃。
But here you can see Moses ask a second time the question, "Who am I?" Right?
这边摩西第二次问说我是谁？
And this time, truly, he has reached a point where he's asking it from a humble point of view. Right?
那这一次我们就可以看到他是用谦卑的态度来问这个问
Let's
题。
turn to Exodus chapter 16, verse 7.
16章第7节，
Exodus chapter 16, verse 7. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for he hears your complaints against the Lord. But what are we that you complain against us?
第7节，早晨你们要看见主的荣耀，因为主听见你们向他发的怨言了。我们算什么？你们竟向我们发怨言呢？
Here, Moses, of course, was speaking with Aaron.
这边，他是在跟亚伦说话，
And they were addressing the people, saying that God has heard their complaints.
他告诉百姓，神已经听到你们发的怨言
And you
了。
can see that they were trying to bring the people's attention and focus to God.
他们借着这个事要把百姓的注意力转移到神身
Say
上
that。tomorrow morning you will see the glory of God,
他们说你们会看见神的荣耀。
right? He hears your complaints. He's a God who listens and sees.
他听到你们的怨言了，他是一个能看见、能听见的神。
But then he goes, but what are we? Who am I?
可是这时候他说：“我是谁呢？我算什么呢？”
Right? Like, we are just God's servants. Who are we that you should complain against us?
我们到底只是谁呢？只是神的仆人。你们
So you
为
can
什
see
么发
here
怨言呢
that？ this is a question that's asked out of true humility.
所以这边他是用谦卑的心来问的。
Right? Because on the spectrum of self-pity, like on one side, on a spectrum, on one side you have something like self-pity. It looks like humility, but it's not.
所以有的人会自己觉得自己可怜，看起来像谦卑，可是不是。
Right? They'll put themselves down. They'll say, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't do that."
他会把自己看得很卑微，说我这个也不能做，那个也不能行。
On the other end of the spectrum, you also have arrogance and pride.
我们在另外一个角度也看到，有的人很骄傲、很自大，
People who are very confident in themselves and arrogant, saying that, "Oh, yeah, of course I can do this." Right?
有的人很自大、骄傲，觉得自己什么都能做。
But then you also have humility, which is in the middle.
但是你也有谦卑，就是在这个中间的地
What is
方。
true humility?
什么是真正的谦卑
True
呢？
humility is knowing your proper position before man and also before God.
这真正谦卑的人是在神跟在人面前都知道自己的位置。
Because Moses now had finally embraced his role as a servant for God.
因为摩西这时候已经真正成为神的一个工人，
And through seeing all of God's miraculous works, he knew that, wow, God is awesome. God is a great God.
当他看到神的一切所作所为，他已经知道我们的神是可畏
And he
敬拜
began
的
to
神。
focus less about himself and his weaknesses and began to turn his attention to God.
他开始慢慢不看见自己的软弱，而去看到神。
And he knew that God was the source of all answers. God is the one we should go to when we have any troubles.
他知道神是我们的答案，我们有困难的时候都可以到神的面
Right?
前。
And not to just focus on our worthlessness, our own lack of ability.
不要只是自己想到这个不能做，自己没有能力。
Right? And so therefore, when he addresses the people here, he realized he truly is able to express that, hey, focus on God. We are just God's servants, and let's ask God to see how he will deliver us.
所以当他在跟百姓说话的时候，他叫百姓一定要看到神，因为神可以帮助他们。
Right? We can also turn to a couple of examples of Moses' true humility.
我们也可以看其他一些摩西谦卑的榜样。
For example, in Exodus chapter 32,
出埃及记的32章，
this is talking about how the Israelites had just created a golden calf.
这时候百姓造了一个金牛犊，
And then Moses was pleading on behalf of the people.
摩西为百姓来代求，
And he truly prayed to God in a humble way.
他很谦卑的来向神祷告。
He knew about his role before God and also before his fellow human beings.
他知道他自己在神跟人面前的职位，
And he was pleading to God on behalf of these people.
然后他为了这些百姓来向神
Right?
祷
You
告
can。see in his prayer, he no longer focused on his low self-worth.
从他的祷告中，你可以看到他没有在专注于自己的不行
But
跟
he
自
focused on
卑，
how God is a merciful God.
他专注在神是一个慈悲怜悯的
He
神。
focused on how God's name would be tarnished if he brought his people out of Egypt only to kill them in the wilderness.
他只是说到，如果神把这百姓带出来埃及，然后又除掉他们，是多么的不荣
Even
耀神、啊。
able to pray to God saying, if you do not save these people, take my name out of your book.
他甚至对神说：“如果你不救这些百姓，把我的名字也从生命册上抹掉吧。
This is a prayer of true humility. ”
这是一个真正谦
To
卑的
know
祷告。
his true position before God.
他知道自己在神面前的位置在哪里。
Yeah. Also, if you look at Numbers chapter 11,
我们如果来看民数记，
this is another time Moses truly was very humble, right?
这个地方也记载到摩西的谦卑。
Because one time there were 70 elders that went up the mountain to have a feast with God.
有70个长老到山上去有一个宴席。
And God's spirit eventually came down upon these elders.
那神的灵就降在这70个长老身上，
And they began to prophesy.
他们就开始说预言，
Right? And that was the one time they did it in their life. They never did it again.
然后他们就这么一次的在他们身上就说了预
And
言。
most of them stopped, but there were two elders that continued to prophesy.
那这中间有2个长老继续的说预言。
And at this time, Moses had his assistant Joshua, who saw this, and he began to be very zealous for Moses.
所以这时候就有约书亚，约书亚看了这个情况，就很认真的来
Right?
为
And
摩
he's
西
telling Moses
做
to
事。
forbid these people.
他就跟摩西说：“你要停止这些人。
Right? And Joshua, he had the incorrect concept. ”
那约书亚这里的观念是错误
Yeah,
的，
he kind of put Moses on a pedestal
他好像把摩西放在台上，
and was thinking that, only Moses should be the special one who does these things.
他想说应该只有摩西可以说预言啊。
Right? But Moses, he had true humility.
可是摩西是很谦卑
He
的，
knew his position before God.
他知道自己的位置在哪里。
Right? And he was telling Joshua, actually, that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit upon all of God's people.
所以摩西就对约书亚说：“愿这个百姓都得到神的灵，他们都可以说预言。”
Right? So again, you can see Moses, through success, he did not then go from self-pity all the way to pride and arrogance. He actually remained very steady, knowing his true position in the face of God.
所以我们知道摩西离开了这个自卑的环境，他没有变成骄傲跟自大，而是他知道自己的位置，很谦卑。
So today, we all are called to serve God. Right?
所以今天我们得到神的呼召来服侍他。
This morning, we're talking about being ambassadors for Christ.
今天早上我们有讲到做神的使者，
Yeah, this is the most basic task we're called to do in this society.
所以这是神呼召我们做最基本的事情。
Of course, there's other different ways we can serve in the church and also outside of the church.
当然还有其他的方法，我们可以在教会或者在社会上服侍神。
But sometimes we may go through times where we look down on ourselves.
可是有的时候我们会觉得自己很自卑，
Yeah, and we doubt ourselves.
我们会怀疑。
And then because of that, we justify inaction.
那因为这样，我们就用行为表
We
现出
say,
来。
the church asks us to do something. We say, no, I can't do that. I
我
don't
们
know.
可能就会对教会说：“这个事情我不能做。”
And that's something that we must be very aware of, that maybe we are in a state of mind that actually God is angry at,
所以我们要小心的处理这事情，也许神会发怒。
right? We shouldn't have self-pity and self-defeat, yeah,
我们可能不要打败自己，或是可怜自己。
right? But we have to have humility before God.
我们要在神的前面有谦卑的
God
心。
has called us to do something, then focus on the God who has called us.
所有神要我们做某些事情，我们要把我们的眼光看在神的身
If
上
we。just focus on our inadequacies, our inabilities, then God will get angry eventually.
如果我们只是一直想说我们自己多么的不足的话，最后可能会得到神的愤怒。
Yeah. So this is something that I think we all eventually might have to go through. Right?
所以这可能是每个人都需要经过的。
It is a transformation that Moses went through, and it's a transformation that we also sometimes have to go through.
这是摩西他的经历，我们可能也都需要经过这样的过
Yeah,
程。
this is also something I have to go through.
这也是我自己本身的经
I
历。
think last August I testified about how I was called to be a preacher.
去年8月的时候，我有见证说我怎么
Yeah.
变成一个传道。
And I think I shared about after God's first 2 callings, how, I really, during that time, I was really, in my heart, I was just thinking, I cannot be a preacher. Yeah.
在神呼召我2次以后，我还是觉得我心里觉得我真的没有办法去做传道。
Yeah, I made a lot of excuses in my heart, at least to God. I was telling God, I don't have the personality, I don't have the eloquence. Right?
在心里我找了很多的借口，告诉神说我没有这种能力，这种口才。
I have brought people to church, but none of them have believed in Jesus or gotten baptized.
我有带人来过教会聚会，可是没有一个受洗。
Yeah, but eventually, after some time passed, I realized that I was focusing way too much on myself.
那在经历过一段时间之后，我发现说我实在把这个重点都放在我自己的身上，
And I was not focusing on the God who had called me.
我没有去看到这个呼召我的神。
Yeah, and I think this is also something that continuously may repeat itself too. Right?
所以这是一直重复的在发
Because
生。
sometimes when you serve God, you will face difficulties and failure even. Right?
在我们在服侍神的过程上，有很多的阻挡，甚至失败。
You may also face times where you don't even know if what you do makes a difference.
那甚至有时候你做了一些事情，你都不觉得说会有造成什么样的不同。
And then those cases, you just focus on, it's because I don't have this, I don't know how to do this. Right?
在那种情况之下，你可能就说，因为我没有这样东西，或是我没有这样做。
Sometimes I have to preach in different languages. Right?
有时候我需要用不同的语言来讲道，
Preaching in Chinese or Spanish.
中文或是西班牙文。
And to me, it's also the same feeling,
对我来讲是同样的感觉，
just like Moses.
就好像摩西一样。
It's easy to make excuses and say, I don't know how to speak this language.
有时候就是跟摩西一样，会找借口说，我就是不会讲这个语言。
And you feel like, how much edification can you truly bring to the listeners?
你会觉得说，你这样子说的话，对听的人有什么造就吗？
But then we have to ask that question, right? Well, God, who are you?
可是我们必须要问这个问题：神啊，你是谁？
And focus on God who has assigned us, who has called us to this.
然后我们要看到这个呼召我们的神，
And do our best to fulfill his assignment.
然后我们用我们尽最大的能力来回答他的呼
And I
召。
think we also will gain a better realization of our own self.
那这个时候我们也会更看清楚我们自己，
Right? Who am I?
我是谁呢？
I'm a vessel of the Most High God.
我是这个至高神的一个工具而已，
Yeah. And he can do wonderful things through us.
他可以借着我们做出奇妙的
But
工，
we must rely on him.
可是我们必须要依靠他。
Yeah. So I hope that this study in Moses' transformation can also help us in our service to the Lord.
我希望我们从摩西的身上，我们可以学习我们对神服侍的态
And
度，
also gain more insight into what is true humility.
然后学习什么是真正的谦
It's
卑。
not just about it's not about putting ourselves down, actually.
并不是我们把自己放得很低
Yeah,
就是
'cause
谦卑。
also in Chinese culture, we tend to do that a lot, right?
那在亚洲人的环境里面，我们常常会觉得这样就是
But
谦卑，
actually, that's not true humility.
但这不是真的谦卑。
Actually, true humility is also if God has assigned you to do something, that you truly fulfill it. And if you have to say something, then you say something.
那真正的谦卑是神呼召你做某件事情，你就站出来去做；你有问题的话，你就提出来。
Right? Yeah, so hope that can give us a good foundation to think about and to rely on when we serve the Lord.
希望这给我们一个根基来服侍神。
Let's now sing hymn number 59.
唱诗59首。